You are the first person to drive a car from the North Cape to Cape Town.
Yes.
How did that happen?
It happened because I got angry. I was actually I was head of the sales, promotion and advertising, etc., and issuing a magazine for Ford Motor Company. That was in Scandinavia, and also taking care of their ice racing team. And I came after a guy who had had the job for 16 years. And he came back in another position, but he wanted to come in and steal a little bit from me because he had to get back into corporation and a better position. And there was a big meeting for the directors discussing next year's budget, etc. When he said, suddenly he irritated me so many times, he said, I've been advertising manager for this company, he says, for 16 years, so maybe it might have some weight in what I said. And I don't know, I just clicked in my head, and I turned to him and I said, you've been advertising director for this company for 16 years, you can be it for another 16 years. And I just stood up and left the room. Mm-hmm. The director, or the manager of the company, president, called up and said, what are you going to do now? And I said, you'll see. I came up on that, I got to do something that people will say, because I can't go out and get another job after firing myself like that. So I got to go do something where people say, of course he quit because he had this so much better to do. So I said, what can I do that no one has done? They have all these things. So I said, no one has driven a car from North Cape to Cape Town, the longest overland drive ever made. I discarded the other from Normandy to Vladivostok in Russia because you couldn't get through Siberia, you couldn't get the licenses. So this was the drive. So I decided to do that, and I had a publisher, and I called up a friend of mine who had been head of truck department at Ford and now was head of Volkswagen in Sweden. And I asked him if he would give me a car, a Volkswagen, for this drive. And he said, sure, Lars, be happy to. So I got one, and then I made a deal with a Swedish newspaper, the Stockholm, second largest, to write articles for them, and they put a 4-column picture of me on the front page with a text under the picture in front of the Volkswagen where it says, Ford's advertising manager drives Volkswagen from Cape to Cape. And I can tell you, the president of Ford didn't like that very much. I bet. And that's how I started. I started because I got angry, and then I did the whole trip, and it was a trip full of adventures and full of thrills, and had led to a lot of strange things afterwards that have crept up in my life and come close to me. I broke down a couple of times because on the way down, the man that was my photographer, his name was Bengt Lindström. He became later the photographer for Lasse Hellström, the Swedish director, who was very well known in the United States, but he started off his fame, I think, with the film My Life as a Dog. And then, so I did the trip and I came back in one piece. I returned to Africa later to write another book. As he wrote an article about Hemmingway some time ago, that he did not like Hemmingway for certain reasons. And I like to tell him that when I wrote my book about Africa, I had a chapter about Hemmingway that was taken out of the book when it was published in England, where I happened to have the same publisher as Hemmingway. Because I did tell a couple of stories about Hemmingway. He wasn't very liked over there. And I thought of telling Andy Rooney that he was pretty well right. I remember in the Amboseli Game Reserve in Africa, there was a game warden called Taberer, and I came there with my photographer and met Taberer, and I showed Taberer a magazine article, I think it was Look magazine, that had a big issue with Hemmingway in Africa. Among other things, there was one photo of Hemmingway with a rifle pointing at a rhino, and on the other side was a picture of Hemmingway with his foot posing on the rhino, together with a big Maasai warrior. And the article wrote there something about this Maasai warrior that was a friend of Hemmingway, that went on lion hunt with Hemmingway. He was an old friend, and Hemmingway had taught him a lot of things. But it was very strange, because that Maasai was not exactly that. He was a sergeant major in the Burmese, in the English Burmese army, and he was more or less of a safe and the lifeguard for Hemmingway. So when I showed this article to Tabor, the game warden, said, "That?" He said, "Yeah, he was here." He said, "Oh, that rhino?" He said, "That rhino died of natural causes. It's my rhino number 17. He had numbers on all the rhinos all around. And when someone came in and said that the rhino had died, Hemmingway rushed out and posed on it as if he'd killed it."
That's funny.
So I said, "Is this the story?" He said, "Yeah, you see, if you want to know more," he said, "you can ask the game warden up in Murchison Falls. When the plane landed at night and he didn't want to cross the river because he was sitting in his airplane all night, they didn't even put up the tent because Hemmingway was so afraid of the lions and stuff around, so he sat in the seat of the airplane all the night until we could take him across the river."
Wow.
So I wrote a chapter, and I said, "I love Hemmingway as a writer." I just wrote the headline, "Hemmingway, why did you do this to me?"
Yeah.
And I think this is about the same thing as Andy Rooney had.
Right.
So I make a film with Sven Nykvist as photographer. That's why I named the name. It was Sweden's first film in CinemaScope. It's called Gorilla. It was a story of the mountain gorillas. We didn't have as much equipment, but I actually made a film about the mountain gorillas 30 years before they filmed Gorillas in the Mist.
Yep.
Had to get to the gorillas, and they didn't come up and pose for us. So all I could hire was a lot of natives from the village and ask them to make a lot of noise. So they came out with drums or whatever and formed a circle. We found out first where the gorillas were, and they formed a big circle, and we tightened the circle and had it open in one place where we put the camera. And if he hears all the noise, he will want to get away from it. So he moves in the direction where there's the least noise, and that's where we have the cameras. And of course that happened.
Yeah.
We did that 3 or 4 times and filmed them. I think good pictures. And that's all we could do. The reason why Sven Nykvist was interested in doing this is that his father was the first missionary in Africa. And he went on to see that part, and I wrote a book for him called the journey to Lambarene.